Hey, my name is Professor Gary Henehan from the School of Food Science and Environmental Health at the Technological University of Dublin in Dublin, Ireland. My talk will be on the subject of biocatalysis, and it's titled The Rise of Biocatalysis, and is going to talk about the changes in the use of enzymes for manufacturing of chemicals, drugs, food ingredients, pesticides, all kinds of commodity chemicals that previously were made by chemical processes that produced a lot of pollution and environmental damage, but are increasingly being switched to bio-based methods of synthesis. And we're going to talk about the importance of this and some of the technology involved, and about our contribution to that area. For example, we spent a lot of time in recent years looking at highly robust enzymes which we've isolated from soils. So we know for a fact that a fraction of 1% of all of the organisms in soils have been characterized. So there's a possibility there that you have all kinds of enzymes that have never been looked at before. And we call this process bioprospecting. So we look for new activities and we screen them. Initially we screened for solvent tolerance. So we looked for organisms that could resist the presence of hexane and cyclohexane, butanol, methanol, and so on. And we isolated a number of strains that were highly resistant, and of course they have biotechnological uses themselves as bacteria, but also their extracellular enzymes turn out to be highly robust as well. So then we look to using those extracellular enzymes to see what we can do with them. One of the first things we tried was the degradation of plastics, because we know the accumulation of plastics in the world is a big problem, and there's a movement now to try and look at enzymes as a mechanism to degrade plastics in the environment. This of course is an advantage because you remove the plastics from the environment, but the other advantage, which is not always seen, is that it allows you to recover the monomers of the plastics and use them again. So you contribute to what's called a circular economy, where the waste product becomes reused. We know that a lot of the traditional plastics, like PET for example, which is widely used, are highly resistant to breakdown in the environment. And it looks like in the future we will be moving away from those type of plastics to more bio-based plastics, and those are things that are like polylactic acid, polybutylene succinate, polycaprolactone, plastics like this. Now these are easier to break down in the environment, but people assume that because it's easy that it's fast. It's not necessarily that quick, and sometimes it would be useful to have enzymes that could assist or speed this process up. So we have approached this in two ways. One is to use the enzymes to digest the plastics before they're degraded in soils, which speeds up the process. The other one is to clone the enzyme into an organism that produces the enzyme extracellularly. So now we have produced an E. coli that will excrete this plastic degrading enzyme, and as a result we hope that that can be used for degrading polymers in the environment. We expect that bioplastics will be the fastest growing area for plastics manufacture in the next 10 years, and we already know people are building giant polylactide producing plants in various places around the world. So it's quite likely that this type of plastic will become more common. And our enzyme, we hope, will be useful for degrading this, and it will be useful for producing the lactic acid, which is the building block, and that can be then used for other purposes. So there's a circular economy that we can take advantage of to break things down and possibly remake them again. And this could be very valuable in terms of not losing the carbon that we're creating. So that's one aspect of the use of these highly solvent tolerant enzymes. Another aspect that we're looking at is to look at synthesis. So for example, if you take some of these enzymes, they can hydrolyze bonds between sugars. We looked at a glucosidase enzyme, for example, and split two sugars into two separate sugars, a disaccharide into two separate sugars. But also these reactions can work in reverse. And so one of the things we're looking at is to try and see how we can make the reaction reverse in media, in unnatural media where the water activity is very low. So for example, we're focusing on deep eutectic solvents at the moment because it turns out deep eutectic solvents are a new type of medium that are very useful for enzymes. Enzymes, they support enzyme activity very well. And a deep eutectic solvent is formed from something like choline chloride that you find in your body and glucose that you find in your body. You mix them together and you get a liquid under certain conditions that's a eutectic solvent. You can put an enzyme into this and it will work away happily. But it works away in the absence of water, and that turns out to be important because you can now reverse the reaction. So enzymes that were designed to break things down can be used to build things up. So this is another area of application that we're looking at.